There's a law in Umasu's village that every child learns before they learn to walk. Do not go to the river after dark. Do not speak to what lives in the deep water. And never under any circumstances make a promise at the river bank at midnight. Umasu knew all 3 laws. She broke all 3 on the same night for her brother. She was 17 years old. Her brother was 11 and dying from a curse she could not break. And the only thing in the world with the power to save him was the thing living in the dark water in front of her. So she did what no girl in that village had done in 3 generations. She called to the river goddess by name, and the river goddess answered. What happened that night changed Umasu forever. What she agreed to, nobody in the village knew. Not her father, not the elders, nobody. Until the morning she was gone. Stay with us. Chidi had been ill for 3 weeks. Not a natural illness, the village. Medicine woman said it on the first day and said nothing after because she was afraid. A curse, placed carefully, designed to look like fever until it was too late. Their father sat in the corner and watched and did nothing, not from cruelty, from the specific brokenness of a man who lost his wife and lost himself in the same season and had not found either since. Umasu had learned to act because someone had to. That night, Umasu sat outside and listened to the river and thought about what old Namdi had told her once, that the river goddess was not a thing to fear, but a thing to respect, that she was fair, that she listened to those who came to her correctly, that she had saved lives before in exchange for what she required. Umasu stood up. She walked to the river. She went to Namdi first. He was already awake. He told her later he had felt it coming for 3 days. He said, do not do this thing, Umasu. She said, tell me how to call her correctly. He said, if I tell you, you will go. She said, I am going, whether you tell me or not. He told her. She called the name 3 times the way Namdi taught her, and the river heard, the water changed. Something that had been sleeping in the deep dark opened its eyes and rose. The goddess looked at Umasu for a long time without speaking. Then she said, you are either very brave or very foolish to call me at midnight, child. Umasu said, my brother is dying from a curse. I want you to break it. The goddess said, and what will you give me in return? Umasu said, whatever you ask. The goddess was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, you. The goddess explained the terms. 1 year, Umasu would serve the river, living in the world beneath the water, learning what the goddess required her to learn, doing what the goddess required her to do. In exchange, Chidi's curse broken that same night. If Umasu completed the year, they both went free. If she broke the agreement at any point, the curse returned to Chidi doubled. And this time it would not take 3 weeks. It would take 3 days. Umasu said yes. She shook the hand of the river goddess at midnight on a bank in her village. And by the time she walked back to the house, her brother's fever had broken. He was sleeping peacefully. He did not know what his sister had done. And in 3 days, she was gone. She had 3 days before the river called her. She spent them carefully. She cooked enough food to last 2 weeks and showed the neighbors how to help. She told her father she was going to stay with relatives and would return. He accepted this with the passivity of a man who had stopped asking questions. She did not tell Chidi anything. She could not find the words that would not frighten him. She went to Namdi on the last morning. She said, watch over them. He said, come back, Umasu. She said, I am coming back. I made a bargain, not a goodbye. He held her hands for a moment, then he let go. On the third morning, the river called, and Umasu walked in. The water was warm, and the world beneath it was nothing like anything she had imagined. The world beneath the river was not what Umasu expected. She had imagined darkness, cold, the suffocating weight of water above her. What she found instead was a world, a complete, breathing, ancient world with its own light, its own rules, its own memory, and its own secrets, buried so deep that even the goddess had stopped looking at them. She had 1 year. She had made her bargain, and now she was here in a place no living person from her village had seen in 3 generations. She was going to survive this. She was going to go home. But first, she had to understand where she was. Stay with us. The goddess's world was built from everything the river had ever swallowed. The roots of trees that had stood for 500 years. The stones of bridges that had collapsed before Umasu's grandmother was born. The memories of everyone who had ever stood at that bank and asked the water for something. All of it still here, still present, arranged into something that was almost a home. The goddess appeared beside her without warning the way things appear in water, suddenly present where there was nothing before. She said you will learn 3 things during your year here. What the river remembers, what the river keeps, and what the river is owed. Umasu said, what does that mean? The goddess said it means exactly what it says. Begin with the first. The river remembered everything. Every prayer spoken at its bank since before the village was a village. Every offering dropped into its current. Every name called across its surface. Every secret whispered to it by people who believed water could keep a confidence. The river kept all of it, and it showed Umasu because the goddess required her to know. And then Umasu saw her mother standing at this river bank young, before Umasu was born, asking the goddess for something. The vision was clear, her mother's face unmistakable, the prayer she spoke unmistakable, and the price she agreed to, the price the river had been waiting to collect, was something that made Umasu's blood run cold, because it explained everything. It explained why Chidi was cursed. It explained why the curse had found their family. And it told her something about the bargain she herself had made that the goddess had not mentioned. Umasu went to the goddess immediately. She said, I saw my mother in the river's memory. I saw what she promised you. The goddess said yes. Umasu said Chidi's curse. Was it connected to my mother's unfinished promise? The goddess was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, everything is connected in the river, child. Everything that touches the water becomes part of the same current. Umasu said, so I am not just here for Chidi. The goddess looked at her. She said you are here because your family's debt to this river has been building for 20 years, and you alone among your family were brave enough to come and face it. By the 3rd week beneath the river, Umasu had learned 2 things with certainty. The first, the river was not cruel. It was simply old and honest, in the way that very old things are honest, without comfort, without softening, without the small mercies that humans use to make truth easier to hear. The second, her mother had been here before her. Not physically, but the echo of her was everywhere in the water, and the story of what she had done was about to change everything Umasu thought she knew about her own family. 20 years ago, before Umasu was born, her mother had stood at this same bank and asked the goddess for a child. She had been married 3 years. She was desperate. The goddess had listened. The goddess had agreed. And the price her mother had offered in the desperation of a woman who wanted a child more than she understood, what she was agreeing to was the first child born of that gift. The first child would belong to the river, would serve it, would carry its knowledge when the time came. Umasu understood then. She was not in the river because she had been brave enough to bargain for Chidi. She was in the river because she had always been going to be here. Her mother's promise had made it inevitable. The river had simply waited for a reason that would bring her willingly. Chidi's curse placed by Adaeze for the land had been the river's way of calling her home to the death. Everything had been arranged. Everything had been moving toward this moment since before she was born. She said, "Did my mother know what she was promising when she promised it?" The goddess said she knew she was promising her first child to the river's service. She did not understand fully what that meant. Umasu said, "Did she know it would be me specifically?" The goddess said she knew it would be someone she loved. That is the nature of the river's price. It always costs what matters most. Umasu was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My mother died before she could warn me." The goddess said yes, and that is the only thing in this arrangement that the river regrets. While Umasu served the river goddess in the world beneath the water, the world above continued. And in the world above, a woman named Adaeze had been watching and waiting. She had placed the curse on Chidi for the family's land. The curse had broken. She had seen it break, felt it break, and knew immediately that someone had made a bargain with the river. What she did not know was who. What she did next nearly destroyed everything. Adaeze went to Umasu's father with a face full of false grief. She said, "I saw your daughter walk into the river the morning she disappeared. She said the river has taken her against her will. She said, you must go to the bank at midnight and call her name 3 times and demand her return. She said only a father's voice can break the river's hold on a child." She said all of this knowing exactly what would happen if he believed her. Papa Emeka loved his daughter. In his brokenness and his passivity and his grief, he loved her. And when Adaeze told him his child was trapped in the river, he did the only brave thing he had done in 2 years. He went to the bank and he called her name 3 times, the way you call someone home. In the river world, the calling of a name from above is the breaking of an agreement. The goddess turned to Umasu. She said, "Your father has called you home. The agreement is broken." Umasu said, "It was not me. It was not my choice." The goddess said the river does not distinguish between a willing break and an unwilling one. A broken promise is a broken promise. The consequences are the same. Umasu said, "What consequences?" The goddess said, "Chidi. A river does not break. It bends, but only for what it has already decided to allow." The goddess told Umasu the terms of the broken agreement. Chidi would receive the curse again, doubled within 3 days. Unless Umasu could offer the river something of equal or greater value than the original bargain. Something the river had never held before. Something worthy of forgiveness. Umasu had 3 days to find what that was. She searched the river's memory for 3 days without sleeping. She looked for precedent cases where the river had accepted a different payment. She found 3. In each case, the substitute had been something the river had never held before. Something new to its memory. Something that expanded what the river knew. And then, she understood. The river remembered everything, but there was one thing it had never held. One thing no one had ever offered it, not in 3 generations of bargains and payments and promises. Truth. Specific, documented, witnessed truth about what had been done to her family, about Adaeze and the curse and the land. The river had the memory of everything that touched its water, but it had never been given the complete truth of an injustice by the person who suffered it freely with full knowledge as an offering. She said, I offered the river the full truth of what Adaeze did, not as a complaint, not as a cry for justice, as an offering. The complete account of how a woman used a curse to try to steal from a grieving family. I offer it so the river holds it forever in its memory, so it can never be erased or denied or forgotten. I offer you permanence. I offer you a truth that will outlast everyone involved. She said, is that worth a year of service? The goddess was silent for a very long time. Then she said, it is worth more. On a dawn in the season of Harmattan, the river gave Umasu back. She rose through the surface the way she had descended quietly, without announcement, without ceremony. The village was still sleeping. The birds were just beginning. And Umasu stood on the bank with river water running off her plaits, and she breathed the air of the land, and she thought, I kept my word. I am home. She was different, not broken completed. She had spent the equivalent of a year in a place where the oldest truths in the world were simply facts. She had learnt what the river remembered. She had seen what it kept. She had given it what it was owed, and in exchange, it had given her something no bargain had included: understanding. The specific understanding of someone who has been shown how things actually work beneath the surface of the world. Chidi ran to her from the compound gate. He had grown slightly in the year she had been gone. The small evidence of time passing on the people you love while you are away. She held him for a long time. She did not tell him what she had done. Some things a sister carries alone. Some prices are paid quietly, so the person they were paid for never has to know the weight of them. Adaeze's secret did not stay buried. The river held it permanent, witnessed, unremovable. And what the river holds eventually surfaces, not always in the way you expect, not always through a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes truth simply becomes known. The way things that have been in the water too long eventually wash up on the bank. By the end of that week, the village knew what Adaeze had done, not because Umasu told them, because the river told them, in its own way, in its own time. Umasu went back to the river bank that afternoon, not to bargain, not to call anything, just to stand at the edge of the water and be in the presence of the thing that had changed her. The river moved the way it always moved, and somewhere in the sound of it, she thought she heard something, not her mother's voice, not the goddess, something older than both, something that sounded like well done. Namdi found her there. He sat beside her without speaking for a long time. Then he said, I told you not to go. She said, I know. He said, I was wrong to tell you that. She said, you were afraid for me. He said, I am still afraid for you. She said, that is love, old man. He said nothing, but he stayed. The village never fully knew what Umasu had done. Villages rarely know the full cost of the things that keep them. They know the surface, the girl who disappeared for a year and came back, the curse that broke, the woman whose secret the water revealed. They know the story they can see. Umasu knew the story beneath it, and she carried it the way her mother had carried her own river story quietly, fully, without expecting to be understood, because some things are between a person and the water never tells. Her name was Umasu. She bargained with the river goddess at 17 years old and kept her word and came home changed and never told a soul the full truth of it, except for an old man who sat beside her at the riverbank one afternoon and said nothing and stayed. And the river ran on, the way rivers always run, remembering everything, keeping everything, owing nothing, and owing everything. That is the end of Umasu's story. If it stayed with you, subscribe to Moonlight Tales by Joy for more stories just like this one. New stories every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Like this video. Share it with someone who grew up near a river and understood what this story was really about. And tell me in the comments what was your favorite moment across all 6 episodes. I read every single one. The next story is already waiting.